It's the BCS Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Brett Chat Sport or BCS Podcast. Since the last episode, I attended the MLB London Series games down in the nation's capital, and it has to be said I had an absolutely wonderful time. Not only was it great to meet some of my previous guests on this podcast, including Charlie Deeks, Nick Wright and Ian Blease, but it's also wonderful to finally meet some of my colleagues at Backflips and Nerds in person, as well as the wider MLB UK community, which brings me on to today's episode. My guest this week is the former footballer Jo Lenton, and we had an absolutely great time chatting all about her career, what she's been getting up to now as part of her second life post football career, and we also got into some issues around LGBTQ plus participation and fandom of sport, and the barriers that can be in the way at times. Once again, absolutely wonderful time chatting with Jo, and I can't wait for you to see this. And so without further ado, I give you Jo Lenton. Hey Jo, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad. Good to see you again. You know, we met at the London Series, and I think a good time was had by all. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this. It's really good to see you again.
Oh, yeah, thank you for having me. It's like a distant, hazy memory now, the London Series, isn't it? So.
Yes. You say distant and hazy. I think those are two words that are very very apt, given the amount that was drunk and.
I was very sensible.
Oh well, no. I mean, I thought I was very sensible as well, but it didn't stop me from waking up afterwards and feeling absolutely awful. Whether that was drink or whether that was just
excitement.
Hard living when I'm not used to it anymore, never mind.
I know the feeling, mate.
Let's get right into it. As always, I start by asking my guests about their sporting allegiances. Who do you support and why, Jo?
Well, on that kind of football world, I am a Newcastle United supporter, which has been a roller coaster over the years, as you can imagine, but always good fun and never boring.
Yeah, certainly. You know, certainly the last few years as well. Like, how do you feel about the new ownership?
Yeah, I've always been a bit torn by that, because it's like one of those things where, like, Newcastle's always going to be my team, and I'm not going to give up on them. But when that all happened, you do question a lot of stuff, and I don't know. I always find that they ask the fans a bit too much. People ask the fans a bit too much about it in some ways, because like I didn't ask for these owners; they were kind of it happened. But the only thing I would say on that, I mean, I try and balance my conscience a little bit. As soon as that happened, I kind of researched the Saudi Arabian thing and Yemen and all that kind of stuff and started donating to UNICEF. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's a small contribution, but it makes me feel slightly more comfortable about how it all worked out.
And in terms of on the field, how are you feeling about Newcastle United currently?
On the field, it's going all right. I mean, last season was not quite as good as the one before when we got the whole Champions League thing, but like most teams I support, we seem to be plagued with injuries. So I think we did all right. I'm excited about the season coming up. So hopefully I'll get up there again and see a couple of games, because we've got some superstars, Bruno and Isak up front, which I'm not going to get their names on my shirt because I do have a famous curse when it comes to sporting jersey. So I've not been tempted to get a new shirt yet. But yeah, and the fix just came out today, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, certainly. And outside of Newcastle United, who else do you support?
I kind of adopted Aston Villa women recently in the last few years, just because kind of got after the Lionesses won the Euros. Was that 2022 now? I can't even remember.
It was
a long time ago, doesn't it? Yeah. Kind of got a lot into the WSL, and I live in Cheltenham, so kind of Villa or Bristol City really are the nearest teams to me, and it was quite easy to get to Villa, so I adopted them. Been following them for the last couple of years, which again did well the year before last, and then not quite so well last season. So it'd be interesting to see how they get on this year, because they'll be losing quite a lot of players, so and a manager. Anyone want to be the manager?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean it's I mean, they, along with all the teams in the Women's Super League, are growing now and are getting and are becoming bigger operations. So it certainly will be interesting to see how they, along with the rest of the league, grow, won't it?
Yeah, because I think the WSL has just been taken over by a new company. I think they're called Newco at the moment, which doesn't sound like an official name, but that is the name of the company that's taken over. And I think they'll be looking into how they can make it even bigger, attract a lot more players from across the world, and possibly expand the league, I think. So exciting times to come in women's football, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. And the reason why you and I met at the London series is that you're also a big baseball fan. Who do you support in baseball?
In baseball, I'm a New York Mets fan for my sins.
Yeah, and how did that come about? How did someone who lives in Cheltenham become a fan of the New York Mets?
I know. So when I go to watch them, I'm like an exotic animal for the people there. They see like an English person and a female coming to watch them, so it's quite funny. But when I was growing up, I was a massive fan of A League of Their Own, the film, and so that piqued my interest. And then kind of years and years later, I stumbled across some games on TV, really, and caught a bit of the Mets playing, and then quite enjoyed it and dipped in and out a bit, and then finally I kind of adopted them. So like Newcastle, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. I kind of really got into it in 2015, and they got to the World Series and lost the World Series. But I thought I was onto a winner, and it's not quite hit the heights since then. But my whole interest in it and enthusiasm has been renewed even more after the London series. So I'm loving the baseball at the moment.
Yeah, certainly. And it should be said, the first baseball game, the first full baseball game I ever saw was the Mets versus the Royals in that 2015 World Series, and it was that got me into baseball. Was sitting there and watching that and going, oh, okay, so that's how baseball works. That World Series is the one that made me understand the rules and got me into this game, sadly. But yeah, it's
once you get sucked in, there's no escape.
You do, yes. You do. Once you actually get what the rules of the game are, and you go, oh, okay, so that's why that's happened, it becomes interesting. And I certainly wanted to know more and wanted to learn more, and yeah, it then all leads to you and I seeing each other in London because MLB's growing its international footprints, and yeah, what wonderful games they were last weekend.
It was amazing, but that's the good thing about being a baseball fan over here, because at the moment we're quite a small bunch, but it's a really fun, sociable, connected bunch of people, isn't it? So when we do have those things like the London games, it's great to see everyone, and you can share the enjoyment with everyone, which was one of the highlights for me in the last couple of weeks. So
yeah, certainly. And you're not just a New York Mets fan. You actually have a podcast about the New York Mets called the Birds with Balls podcast. It's you and two other ladies. Please do tell me more about it.
Yeah, well, I must admit, it's probably not just the Mets, because Molly, who I do it with a girl called Molly and Tracy. Tracy's a Mets fan like me, so she's sensible, and Molly's a Dodgers fan. So I think we started it. I was trying to think earlier. I think it was kind of one of those pandemic type things, because when we were all sat at home thinking what to do, kind of rounded those two up, and we started it then, which was quite an interesting time to do it. Because I think our first episode was December 2022, and literally not long after, we got embroiled in a bit of a scandal.
Oh, go on. Go on.
It's not that bad.
You've mentioned that. You've got to tell us more about it now, Jo.
It was like almost perfect timing for our emergence in some ways, because it was when they, I think it was the British Baseball Federation, I think that's who they were, they just about to start a women's league, and the guy in charge at the time decided he would advertise it by using an image of a woman in like a bit of a, I don't know, what would you call it, a racy type outfit.
Okay.
which kind of didn't really fit with the vibe and the spirit of women's sport and all that kind of stuff. So we started a bit of a campaign which went on, and it picked up so much traction. I think eventually, I'm not quite sure how long after, he ended up quitting. So the head of the Women's Federation, and got a bit of an apology, and since then, like promotion of the women's stuff and everything has been spot on. So I can't grumble. But yeah, that was one of the first things we got involved with, and then since then we've we do pods regularly. We talk about baseball, but we kind of branched out a bit just to talk about women's sport in general as well. So yeah, chat about everything really. Mostly nonsense and craziness, but it's good fun.
I mean, fairness, I think there are a lot of podcasts that talk about nonsense and craziness. This one included. But,
exactly. And we entertain ourselves, and people listen. So, and we must be doing something all right.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have an audience and that audience enjoys what you're doing, then that's the whole point, is it? And as long as you're having fun, all three of you, then that makes it all the better, and ultimately the important thing, is it?
Yeah, and we're good mates. We're good mates in real life, as in not in pod life too. So we're all at the London series and had our pitch taken together and stuff. And I used to play baseball with Molly as well. So, and then I know Tracy through all the Met stuff. So no, so we're a good bunch. It's good fun.
Yeah, certainly, and it has to be said that baseball, and is not just a passion of yours. You've had other passions before. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is that you actually used to be a semi-professional footballer. You played for Cheltenham Town. You played for Chelsea for one game only. You were keen
that counts, though, right?
Yeah, you were keen to make sure it was for one game only, but you played for Chelsea ladies as well, as among other teams. Please do tell me about that. How did you get into football and become so good at it that you actually played at the semi-professional level of the women's game in this country?
Well, I must have. I never kind of got paid as such, so in that sense, but because I think before when I started playing, it was a whole different ball game to it is today. But I just started as a kid, really. But growing up in Somerset in the 1980s and 90s, there wasn't as many opportunities. So I think there must have been a little Bristol City soccer school at the park one day, and then I got into, through that and played a bit with Dad, always would kick around with me and stuff. And then I ended up playing for a local team in Pilton, which is where they have the Glastonbury Festival. So if you played for the team at that time, you used to get free tickets, which is quite handy, but a bit too young to appreciate back then. And then, I just ended up kind of moving up the leagues a bit. I got scouted by Clevedon and then played for them for a while, and then I ended up going to university. So I joined the university team at that point, which is good fun. Kind of not quite serious at that point, the football, because you kind of go out for a few drinks afterwards. But what did I was just trying to think. And then I left uni, went to a team called Oldland Abertonians in Bristol, which was like proper local Sunday league football. So it's actually quite fierce back then. Not quite as glamorous as you see on the TV now. But that's when I had the classic women's football injury, which seems to be very, very common, the old ACL. Because there's so many instances of that now. But I managed to get over that, and then I ended up probably the biggest team I played for was Cheltenham. So that was kind of where I finished my proper footballing career before age and injuries overtook me, fortunately.
Yeah, and so I mean, me and you were roughly about the same age, so it's you were,
I often forget how old I am. I think I'm 42.
No, I mean, well, yeah, we are. As I say, we are roughly about the same age, and so I'm guessing your playing career was certainly before the advent of the Women's Super League and the increased exposure that we've seen for the women's game in recent years. What do you make of the advances that the women's game has seen in recent years?
I think it's incredible, really, because a lot of credit does go to a lot of the people that played before. I mean, I'm not including myself in that, but I always think, like, just only a few years before I was born, women weren't even allowed to play football because the FA banned them. So I think in that relatively short space of time, I think it's incredible how big it's got. Because I mean, over the years I've played with, now and again I played for teams where they've signed someone who played for England on like a short-term deal just to get them in because they weren't playing at the time, and they were like superstars to me then. But like now, the England players are like on another level in terms of superstardom, because you'd probably recognise them walking down the street these days, wouldn't you?
Yeah, certainly. It would be fair to say that the Lionesses now are household names. Mary Earps was BBC Sports Personality of the Year last year. And so it's certainly, we've certainly seen a growth in the game in this country. Has to be said, the women's game has been a big deal in other countries for a long time now. I'm certainly thinking of places like America and Scandinavia and continental European countries like Germany, for example. So, like, you know, what do you think it was that meant that we did eventually start to catch up to those nations in terms of the reverence that we gave the women's game in this country? You know, is there a specific moment in your mind where you saw things change?
I don't know. I guess I mean, the Euros, when winning them in 22 was the big moment, but then there were a couple of tournaments before that, World Cups and Euros, where we got to kind of semi-finals and finals, where it just started to register on the national radar. But as soon as they started putting money into it properly and investing in it, so women could give up jobs and focus on it full time as, you know, a proper career. As soon as you start doing that, the kind of quality levels went through the roof, and then people will watch it. Because back in my day, there was like two blokes and a dog watching. And to be fair, the quality of some of it was pretty poor. So now, I mean, there's, apart from the odd hater, people like Joey Barton who's just trying to get attention, people like him, I think people just respect it more. And then that Euros win just exploded it into a whole nother level. So, and I don't think there's any going back from here, really. I think it's only going to get bigger and bigger. Especially with all the young girls now and the opportunities they've got to play, not just boys' teams. You know, they've got their own teams they can play for these days and stuff, and they can say to their careers teachers that they want to be footballers, which I think is the coolest thing. I wish I could have said that to my careers teacher back in the day.
Certainly, and I mean, one of the things that has struck me about the women's game in this country and how it's advanced and gained in prominence is there's a lot of talk of social issues that are connected to the game as well. Something that I know is certainly close to your heart is that there are a lot of prominent LGBTQ plus women's footballers now, and they are quite rightly advancing that cause. You know, it's certainly when I was a kid, it felt like certain groups were not necessarily welcome at sporting fixtures. You know, I mean, that wasn't just people who were LGBTQ plus. I would say that would apply to a lot of other groups, and it strikes me that in this moment we are starting to hopefully make people who are LGBTQ plus more welcome. Like, is that? Do you feel that? Am I only imagining that, or is that true?
I think it's slightly skewed for me because I've always played women's football and I've always been around women's football. It doesn't feel any different to me in that since I played, like, loads of girls have been kind of gay and stuff like that. It's just been almost the norm. So there's never been those acceptance issues. But once you step outside of that into other sports and kind of male sports and things like that, it gets a bit different. But women's football in this country is probably one of the most inclusive environments you could ask for. I mean, even going to watch games, it's such a different atmosphere than watching men's football, for example, which, to be fair, I've never felt particularly uncomfortable at any matches, but there'd be I would quite easily happily take, for example, my 6-year-old niece to a women's Super League match, but I probably wouldn't quite feel the same way about taking her to a Premier League match, for example, just because of the stuff people come out with and the way they behave a lot of the time. But not just from an LGBTQ plus perspective, just from a kind of social general perspective about the culture of the men's football compared, I guess, over the years.
Sure. Is it a case then that we need to improve the culture of the men's game? Like, that, do you think that the men's game in this country can learn something from the women's game in that regard?
I think we're getting there. I think it is improving. I think just as the generations go on, I think it's becoming a lot more of the norm to see lots of different types of people at these things. But I think as often the way, the noisiest, angriest people are the ones that are just used to how it used to be and they don't want to change. So I think it's definitely getting better. I mean, you think about, who was it? My sister asked me, or someone asked me, how come the women's team, England team, takes the knee still and the men's team doesn't? But there's so much controversy, around things like that. It's crazy. But I think we've got a young men's England's team now too, and I think they're all quite socially conscious, and I think that helps them talking about these issues as well. Helps it, because it's not. It's just normal now. Like, let's all just get along. It's just mad.
Yeah,
if only it was that easy, but you know.
Yes, exactly. If only it was that easy. Do you do you see this as a moment then where we can start to increase participation among LGBTQ plus people? Do you see this as a moment where we can hopefully start to welcome more LGBTQ plus people into the fold, both participating and spectating? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always been that in some senses, but I think people feel more comfortable talking about it. Because I don't know if you saw, I think it was on TNT or BT Sport or whatever it's called now. Ryland did a documentary about going to football as a gay man,
Yes.
and how he still gets the odd comment, but generally it's a much better environment. And I know a lot of teams now promote that side of things, don't they? Because you always see at Tottenham, you see the big kind of rainbow stuff, which again, being a Newcastle fan is slightly weird, because you think where the culture, our owners, where they're from, but meanwhile Newcastle are promoting inclusion here. It's just such a weird contradiction in many ways, but it's getting better. I'm positive about things, so I think it'll be a upward curve of acceptance going forward.
Yeah, certainly, and ultimately, as long as you feel welcome, and as long as everyone starts to feel welcome, that has to be the goal. That we have football grounds and other sporting venues where everyone feels that they are welcome there, that they can be their authentic self there.
Yeah, I can't think. I'm just trying to think. There's nothing in our culture in terms of sports in this country that I wouldn't go to. I don't think. I mean, that's where we are now. I think it's a lot better. But they're the kind of things we talk about a lot in our Birds of Balls podcasts and stuff, and different sports and how things have improved. So I'm pretty positive, but then I'm quite a positive person. So.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad to hear that then. And in terms of post football career, what do you get up to now? What are how do you feel your days? Like, you've had as you said, you weren't paid a lot during your football career, so you all had a working life. But how do you feel your days now that you no longer play football?
I think I'm putting it down to the style of the football I did play, which was a lot of slide tackles and a lot of running around like a mad person. So unfortunately, my injuries caught up with me with the old knee and the ACL, and then I had to have a hip operation just a couple of years ago now. But just before I had that, and in the pandemic kind of lockdown type era, I played a bit of baseball actually. So I gave that a go, Bristol. Played on the mixed team, and then like I mentioned before, we had the women's team, which I really, really, really enjoyed. But playing is so much different to watching. The amount of concentration you need. When you watch it on TV, you think it's so easy, isn't it? You get the ball, you throw it there, they're out, job done. But when you're like trying to do that, and think about it playing, it's so hard. But I'm glad I gave that a go. But since the hip thing, mainly I just do gym stuff, which is a bit boring. So not quite so much team sports now. So that's why I try and fill all my days interacting with lots of the baseball community and doing the podcast and all that kind of thing, just to keep you going, really.
Sure. Okay. Well, as long as you are filling your time and you're able to keep active throughout the through the injuries, then that's the important thing. Before I let you go, Jo, we mentioned the Birds with Balls podcast. Where can my viewers and listeners find that if they'd like to give it a listen or watch?
Yeah. More than welcome to give it a listen. Like I say, it's a craziness warning because it does go a bit off piece sometimes. But we are on X, Twitter at Birds of Balls, and then Birds of Balls on Instagram, Facebook, a bit of Threads, not quite so much Threads, but the podcast is also in all the usual places. So Apple, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. So there's a good few episodes on there if you're feeling brave enough to start from the beginning. But we should be doing another one very soon. And sneaky preview, we might even have an Olympian on soon to talk about the Olympics. So that'll be exciting. Yeah.
Oh, very, very exciting!
Yeah, I know.
I look forward to hearing that then. Yeah, I think it's been wonderful to chat to you, Jo. Thank you very much for giving me your time. And yeah, if I don't see you before, I hope to see you again at the London series in 2 years' time.
Oh, it seems so far away, but yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. It's been good fun.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jo. It's been really good to talk to you, and yeah. Speak to you again. So there you have it. What I felt was an absolutely wonderful conversation with Jo there. I really enjoyed getting to know more about her and her career as a footballer and what she's getting up to now. But more importantly, something that I really want to do on this podcast is talk about real issues in relation to sport and LGBTQ plus participation in sport and fandom of sport is certainly a very serious and important issue. Anything, whether it's a person's race, their religion, their sexuality, their gender, whatever, anything that prevents a person from feeling that they can participate in or be a fan of a sport, the prejudice towards those groups, that is something that needs to be tackled. Everyone should feel welcome at sports venues, and everyone should feel that they can participate in sport as well. And as much as Jo said it herself, we are getting better both in this country and around the world, but there is still a ways to go, and we as a society need to play an active role in improving things and making sure that everyone feels welcome at sports venues, everyone feels able to participate in sport, and the more that we can do, the better we as a society will be, certainly in my book anyway. For now though, that brings to an end another episode of the BCS Podcast. I thank you as always for joining me, and I sincerely hope to see you again next time. Bye bye now. The BCS Podcast is written, produced, edited and hosted by me, Brett Walker. Thank you to Music Unlimited and Pictorbay for the use of the music and sound effects. This week's guest was Jo Lenton,